What if the worst day of your life started like any other? A quiet morning, a cup of coffee, the smell of salt water. And then, before you even understood what was happening, the sky turned black with enemies and paradise became a tomb. On December 7, 1941, American sailors woke up to hell on Earth. Battleships erupted, men became human torches, and the United States was thrust into a global war it never asked for. But while the world focused on the flames of Hawaii, another nightmare was unfolding thousands of miles away in the frozen wastelands of Finland. Here, the enemy wasn't just Soviet soldiers. It was the cold itself. Negative 45 degrees Celsius, winds that froze the breath in your lungs. And yet, against impossible odds, a tiny nation of skiers, farmers, and hunters refused to surrender. They invented new ways to kill. They used the frozen bodies of their enemies as warnings. And they produced a sniper so deadly, they didn't just call him a soldier. They called him the White Death. This video isn't about the history you already know. It's about the brutal, terrifying, and unbelievable moments they left out of the textbooks, the last-minute warnings that arrived too late, the guerrilla tactics that turned glass bottles into weapons of war, the soldiers who watched their friends burn alive on Battleship Row, and the snipers who stayed buried in snow for days just for one perfect shot. These are the stories of ordinary people facing extraordinary horror. From the warm waters of Pearl Harbor to the frozen killing fields of Finland, this is the war you thought you knew. But trust me, you don't know it like this. Stay with me until the very end, because the most brutal moments are the ones they never talk about. Let's begin. On the morning of December 7th, 1941, residents of Oahu, Hawaii, awoke completely unaware that they stood on the brink of one of the most notorious moments in modern military history. The assault claimed the lives of more than 2,400 Americans as warning sirens wailed. Japanese aircraft dominated the skies, and every moment carried life-or-death consequences. Today, we're examining a detailed, moment-by-moment account of the strike on Pearl Harbor, notorious military dates you'd like us to cover. Now let's tell this tale with more accuracy than a certain Hollywood director. At precisely 6 a.m. on Wednesday, November 26, 1941, an imposing Japanese carrier force departed from Hitakapu Bay, embarking upon an entirely covert operation. They navigated a course toward the Hawaiian Islands through the desolate northern Pacific region, enduring conditions that bordered on freezing. Throughout the subsequent 12 days, the vessels maintained absolute radio silence to ensure no intelligence could expose their approaching assault. Uncomfortable sleeping quarters and communication blackouts represent the cost of maintaining operational secrecy. Around this same period, American Secretary of State Cordell Hull delivered a diplomatic demand to Japanese leadership requiring troop withdrawal, a document history would record as the Hull Note. Japan's Prime Minister Hideki Tojo characterized this communication to his ministers as nothing less than an outright demand. At 3:42 a.m. on December 7th, merely hours preceding the assault, the American vessel USS Condor identified an enemy submarine operating near Pearl Harbor. The Condor, functioning as a minesweeper, directly witnessed the vessel and spotted its raised periscope. Information promptly relayed to the destroyer USS Ward. The complete picture would remain unclear to the world for years, yet Japanese forces had invested considerable months orchestrating this very moment. By the early morning of December 7th, the strike force had established its final position 275 miles north of the intended target. At 6 a.m. precisely, the initial grouping of Japanese aircraft launched from their carriers. This aerial assault force comprised fighter planes, dive bombers, and torpedo-carrying aircraft. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida led this initial wave, later describing how his formation required 1 hour and 40 minutes following carrier departure before glimpsing land. Suddenly, a distinct white line where waves broke against shore appeared directly underneath his aircraft. He had located Oahu's northern coastline. At 6:45 a.m., while the initial Japanese bombers continued their approach toward Pearl Harbor, the USS Ward finally pinpointed and destroyed the enemy submarine detected by the USS Condor hours previously. These represented the initial casualties of the impending assault and undoubtedly felt like a significant achievement for American personnel. Locating and eliminating an enemy submarine would provide tremendous morale enhancement during normal circumstances. Nevertheless, the Ward's crew remained completely unaware of the massive assault approaching or the destruction about to occur. Interestingly, natural elements nearly prevented the Japanese strike entirely. Rough sea conditions almost caused complete mission failure. It seems almost unbelievable, yet pilot Tokuji Iizuka reported that the aircraft carriers experienced substantial rolling, pitching significantly side to side. These conditions made launching operations extraordinarily challenging. Simply maintaining balance would prove difficult in such circumstances, much less piloting aircraft from a moving vessel. Iizuka himself departed from the Imperial Japanese Navy carrier Akagi around 7 a.m., accompanying the second assault wave. The attackers required 2 hours reaching Oahu. By their arrival, combat operations had already commenced. Shortly past 7 a.m., American forces finally detected the incoming aircraft through the Opana mobile radar installation. Operated by military personnel, this radar station on Oahu functioned as an advance warning system. Logic suggests that when an Army's early detection radar contacts authorities about an incoming threat, appropriate personnel would immediately respond. Yet, when radar operators contacted United States Army Pacific Headquarters at Fort Shafter in Honolulu reporting the anomalous detection, they received instructions to follow proper military protocol and await contact from a superior officer before taking action. 20 minutes afterward, at 7:20 a.m., a Fort Shafter officer finally addressed the radar detection of Japanese aircraft. Unfortunately, this officer dismissed the radar signature as expected. American B-17 bombers arriving from California. Somber music fades in. Slow-motion footage of waves crashing against the USS Arizona Memorial, cross-fading into a wide shot of a snow-covered Finnish forest. December 7, 1941, a date that still echoes. A morning when 2,400 Americans never saw the sunset. Their battleship, the Arizona, still rests at the bottom of Pearl Harbor today. Not just a wreck, a tomb, a monument, a reminder that freedom isn't free. It's paid for in blood, steel, and the breaths of young men who never got to grow old. And in those frozen Finnish forests where the temperature itself was a weapon, another kind of sacrifice unfolded. A tiny nation stood alone against a giant. They didn't have the tanks. They didn't have the numbers. But they had something the Soviets never expected. They had fury. When the snow finally melted and the guns fell silent, over 25,000 Finns had given everything. But they took nearly 200,000 Soviets with them. They proved that war isn't always won by the biggest army. Sometimes it's won by the people who refuse to quit, the people who turn bottles into bombs, the people who use frozen corpses as warnings, the people who stare into the white abyss and whisper, "Is that all you've got?" World War II claimed over 70 million lives. But behind every number was a face, a name, a family who never got a knock on the door, a mother who waited forever for a son who was never coming home. The Arizona still leaks oil, one drop every minute. They call it the tears of the fallen. So here's my question for you, and I really want you to answer this in the comments.